or donate online today at together.ca. That's together.ca. The Humanitarian Coalition. Together, saving more lives.
This is Rogers TV, Grey County. The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest today is MPP Bill Walker, who is about to undergo a huge transition. And I say that as someone who has retired, because Bill has announced that he is not going to be running in the next election. But we're going to talk a bit about some of the things that the government is doing right now and has done in the last few months, announced in the last few months. And then we're going to take a little bit of a retrospective on Bill's political career and talk to him about some of the highlights and, dare I say it, the lowlights of politics in Ontario, because as everyone knows, we're on the cusp of an election, and it's heady times for anyone who is interested in politics. So welcome, Bill. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much, David.
Now, you're in your office here in Owen Sound because the House is in recess, is it not? Or
That's correct.
Yeah, it's in recess. It's the March break, and
Correct.
Yeah, so all things are quiet, but they're not quiet.
That is correct. They're not certainly quiet on the phones or the emails or all the social media, but yeah, a little quieter week in Queen's Park this week.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that even though the House is not sitting, the announcements continue because, of course, we're, as I said, on the cusp of an election. And I have to say that there was a massive announcement yesterday. We're taping this midweek, but there was a massive announcement of funding for local long-term care homes.
Yeah, great announcement. $7,200,000, David, for a number of facilities and programs in our area. And a lot of that really is about the care for people. We made the commitment to get to 4 hours of care daily for residents. And it's going to be, I think, life-changing for many people. And many of these organizations, it's always a challenge. We all know that there are challenges with PSW and nursing shortages. This is going to give them some relief for that. And most importantly, the people are going to get more of that care per day, that hands-on touch-to-touch care. So I'm ecstatic about it. I've always followed long-term care. I was a critic for a couple of years when I was in opposition. So this is something that is good. And to your point, I mean, in COVID, it was really challenging because everybody was so focused on COVID. A lot of this good work was going, but it kind of, do you put out announcements or don't you put out announcements when you're trying to fight a pandemic? And so there are a lot of announcements right now, but that's partly because, as you said, the work didn't stop just because of COVID. It was moving. You had to get things through Treasury Board and get approved. And now it's at a point where you can do it. So in my case, regardless of what day it came out, I'm just really excited that for places in our own backyard, a lot of money and a lot of improved care.
Yeah, I think that there was what was really interesting was that there was a wage increase for PSWs that was announced as well. And that's permanent. That's not going to be, that's something that's going to stick.
Yeah. So again, we obviously heard that throughout the pandemic. There was a lot of challenge, a lot of transition in PSWs, and that was one way to incentivize and try to standardize and stabilize the system during COVID. But we certainly respect and appreciate that was there, and that was a big piece of why people were leaving, is they could go somewhere else and work in much less tenuous circumstances in many cases. So we felt, and certainly Cabinet made the decision that this was valid and warranted, and they've made it permanent. So again, great news for PSWs and gives them that sustainability and long-term outlook as well.
Do you think this will have an effect on the mobility issue? And when I say the mobility issue is that there were I was just happening to see something on television last night about the one long-term care home that had 0 cases of COVID. And they attributed their success, this is down in Richmond Hill, to they were diligent and continuous COVID testing. But more importantly, they offered job security to their staff. that they would not allow their staff who worked there to work in other nursing and long-term care homes. And as a result, they had, in any cases of COVID that occurred, were immediately cohorted and isolated. Well, they cohorted their staff, but they also isolated them so that they did not have access to that sort of bubble. But was there anything in the announcement about improving job security?
Well, I don't know in this announcement, but I certainly know, David, that is one thing, nursing widespread, if you will. We certainly in our own backyard have experienced the Chesley Emergency Department closure and Walkerton closure. So we've had a number of different discussions with Ontario Health and with the Health Ministry to talk about that in the longer term and systemic way. And that is one of the challenges of, some people want to be able to work and move around and have that mobility ability. Others don't want it. Some are forced to have it because of budgetary cycles and those type of things. So it is definitely something that I know is being looked at by the ministry and Ontario Health to say, if that is one of the biggest challenges, then let's look at that. And over time, like anything, systems change, companies work differently. Some people, again, don't want full-time work. So that casual part-time, I think like you see it in some cases. Some people want that from a lifestyle. Other cases, it was kind of, I've only got 4 hours a day for you to work there. And that certainly does create challenges for those people that need more sustainable income. So I do think it's not addressed in this, but I do know that it's being looked at on the more global picture, if you will. And also what we found is a lot of people moving within COVID as well from, I know talking to Chapman House, there were people there that moved from Chapman House to the hospital because, again, there's a wage discrepancy. And that's challenging because all those are different corporations. They have different pay structures, and you can't restrict people from moving. But it certainly has a domino backwards impact that if Chapman House loses 2 nurses, it's good for Grey Bruce or wherever they're going to further their career, but not good for Chapman House. And then Chapman House is looking to another place to recruit nurses. So it's kind of that evolving. And I just think what it's really shone the light on here is we need to do a look at today's world and what people want as well. Not everybody wants to work weekends and nights, and that sadly is a reality of nursing. And I think when you're full-time, that gives them as the operator the ability to say, here's your shift for the month. Here's what if you're signing on, this is what you have to do. Some people are still going to say, I don't want that. I only want 4 hours a day. So I think it's going to be ever evolving. And it is something I can tell you from my perspective. And Lisa Thompson, we've been working with the corporations here, Ontario Health and the ministry to say we need to solve this nursing challenge because it has a huge impact.
It's funny you say that, Bill, because I recall a few years ago, and I'm now probably talking close to 10, but I think the problem is still there, of people who were working in mental health. And these were credentialed professionals, and the salary difference between working in outpatient services and working in the hospitals was when I learned it was absolute, but it was absolutely astounding. And when we did some work and dug a little deeper, staff who moved simply said, look, I can't afford not to.
Yeah.
So there was also been some parallel funding increases for mental health, has there not? The government has said we're going to put some money on mental health as well.
Absolutely. And even, David, taking it a step further, I had a meeting last week with, and I'm trying to think what the agency's called, but they're basically your heating and HVAC type of people, where, again, we're saying, some of the big corporations are paying, $50 an hour for a tradesperson. I'm your local person. I can only afford $30. And I keep losing people, which means they can't come and service your home air conditioning or heating system, right? So, and that becomes challenging for government because if you start getting into dictating what companies can and can't charge or pay their employees, right? And I kind of said to them, the employee, if they can make 50 instead of 30, they're probably going to do it. Who are we really to start jumping into some of that? So definitely mental health is another area. I think that whole area, again, you're going to see some real insightful thought process. I think you're going to have some, whether they want to call them consultations, whatever the process will be, but really dive in depth, because what you don't want, like the PSW is what was happening, 50% of a graduating class were staying less than a year in the actual employment field that they chose. Well, that's not good to have that type of churn. And in the nursing sector, it's interesting, I think, again, what we need to do better of is to understand what our need is going to be in 10 years and start building the model there, as opposed to using the past 10 years and how many students we've churned through. We have an aging demographic. We have a lot of nursing professionals and many different occupations that are at that baby boomer stage. Well, what do we do to replace them? How many years? You don't just flip a switch, and that's the challenge we're in right now. Great that we have the program brought back to Georgian College in the last year for nursing, so that they again don't have to go off to take university training and credits somewhere else. That is going to help us, but it's not an immediate switch for the Chesley Hospital, for example. So I just think that visionary, what's the supply and demand, and has our college and university structure been bridged to make sure we're keeping up with tomorrow's need as opposed to just today's.
You're making a very good point, Bill, because wasn't there also an announcement about increased internships for physicians as well?
Yes.
And this is all, but this is with a physician, someone who's entering medicine today. We won't see them out the door for 8 years.
That's correct. That's correct.
So you're really, it's an announcement which plans for the future, but we don't know where we'll be in the 8 years from now. But let's hope that we'll be in a lot better shape. So it's an interesting discussion to have, but the changes are coming, is what I'm hearing you say.
I think, David, to your point, you don't know for sure in 8 years what we're going to need, but I think we can do the projections and at least be preparing for a vision and a number that we're going for. The other one that I think is really interesting, and it's happening again here, Grey County has had it for a little while. Bruce County has just been approved as well. So our paramedicine, so that they again can do things in at-home visits, kind of enhancing people to stay in their home, to be able to do some of that. And keep it out of the emergency department or a walk-in type of family health team type of situation. So I think, again, there's a lot of good things, but it is change, which people don't necessarily always like, and it does take time to figure the system and to get it smooth. But I'm really actually quite pleased with some of the enhancements that we've done. And again, some of it's got blocked because COVID was such a glaring spotlight for people, that some of these good things have been put in place, but how many people really even knew that they were happening? So again, good to have these announcements out. And sometimes, people say, oh, you've already announced that once. Well, if it was in the middle of COVID, I'm okay to go out and do another announcement about something, for example, like the Markdale Hospital, which I drove by this morning coming home from Toronto. Great to see it coming out of the ground.
Yes, Bill, that's a good one. Markdale Hospital. We got to put Markdale Hospital into our conversation at least once, because we've talked ever since I've been on this show. We've talked about Markdale Hospital every single time you've been on. So yes, it's coming along, and it's looking good.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Your comment, though, about what are called community care paramedics, and I have to say that I did interview Kevin McNabb, who's the director of paramedic services for Grey County, and he was pointing out that this is actually a specialty, a subspecialty within paramedicine, that a community care paramedic is now a recognized subspecialty, just as advanced care paramedics are, and others. And he was pointing out this will really enhance their ability to be in the community and care for the community in ways they have not been able to do, except under sort of special programs. So they're quite enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, and ever enhancing, and I think there are some pilots going on as well to take it even another step further, particularly in some of our small rural hospitals like at Chesley, if I can use that as an example, where they can, over those evening hours when they're not out on calls, they can come in and do some stuff in a hospital setting. Again, very specialized. It's not going to happen overnight, and it may not happen everywhere, but there are places that they're trying that, to say you've got staff that aren't out in the ambulance, paramedic going somewhere. You've got some people in a hospital outpatient that you can be giving some convalescent care type of help to. So I again think it's a credit to Kevin and those people in their leadership positions that bring those ideas, and equally important, the staff who are actually on the ground with the boots on, that are actually doing it and prepared to do that, because it is a change for them as well. I mean, if you've been doing the same job for 10 years one way and all of a sudden somebody hoists a new idea, you need to have them engaged for it to work well.
Yeah. Now let's shift this a little bit to something a little more, something that affects every single one of us outside of health, and that's license plates.
Yes.
And we had it was an announcement not long ago by the Premier that we're not going to have to pay any more license plate renewal fees, and then we're going to get a rebate on going back to, I believe it's 2020.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Do you know, but I've also heard from the police, they're saying, just a minute, the registration stickers really are a help to us. Are we going to still have registration stickers, but we won't pay fees for them? Or what's the story on that?
So my understanding is there won't be an actual physical sticker, but you will have technology within the license plate that will be a reader. And again, that's an enhancement that's coming. Many other forces in other countries have been doing this for quite some time. But again, the sticker is really, it's just a piece of the component. But from a policing and a safety, they'll read your license plate. You'll still have to register that license plate so that we know David, is legal. He has a license. He has insurance, because that obviously is a critical component. And they'll be able to do that with your actual license plate, kind of like, I mean, I don't know if it'll ever get to the barcode type of mindset, but that's how I envision it. Is it'll scan your license plate right from the cruiser, and it'll go to the central database and say, okay, David's a good guy, he hasn't had any speeding tickets, or David's not a good guy, he has an outstanding speeding ticket, or whatever the case may be. So I think that case, and I was the minister doing some of that originally, and I did a lot of a thought with that regard to how does it impact our police services. The real impetus of this was really, I think, the Premier and Cabinet, and I wasn't at the table when this decision was made, but my understanding is, this was to give relief to everybody for the most part, or the majority of people have cars, particularly out in rural areas like ours where you really don't get around well without a car. This was giving you some immediate relief. You don't have to go through the process of a sticker again, going out in the middle, in my case, December, freezing to put that sticker on and forgetting about it sometimes for a couple of weeks, and getting a little tap from the OPP at times to say, Mr. Walker, where's your sticker? Forgot to put it on because it was that freezing time in December. So it really was intended to, can we modernize, can we do it, and one less cost that a family now can take that money and put it into whatever their choice may be. And we certainly have heard from many, many families during COVID how challenging it has been financially. Gas is going up, groceries are going up. This is one way to give them some money back, but we don't lose the safety of the license plate monitoring.
Sure, and if you ever want to see that monitoring work, there is a show on television called Parking Wars about parking enforcement officers in Philadelphia. I hope we never get to that, but it does show the technology at work where they drive down the street, and if your license plate if you have outstanding parking tickets, it goes boop boop, and they'll go out and boot you. We're not going to go that far, obviously, but at this point, the technology is well proven, so we'll see how it works. Other things that have happened, and this is one of the is it really interesting, is that there's been some announcements for Trillium Foundation, about $725,000 for Trillium. Where's that money going to go?
I don't have that one in front of me, David, just from the most recent, that was a couple of weeks, but we've done a fair bit of stuff in regard to, there's a recreation stream, there's a community development. A couple were certainly things like curling clubs, the Blue Water Curling Club here in town, and that was enhancing their equipment and their scheduling ability, their refrigeration. Definitely there was one in Allenford. I was over to Meaford, sorry. They got some money for their curling club. And some of this, again, was related to COVID and them not having the ability to have their membership in, so they lost revenues. And how do they sustain the club? Because, your energy costs and those type of things, you still have to have ice and do those things. So many of those were supporting those type of programs. Quite a bit of money has actually came back in for the seniors programs. I just did one the other day for some seniors programs and active seniors lifestyle program grants. Some of our groups, like the Summer Folk, have received Trillium Foundation funding. So I've always been, long before I ever got into politics, I was actually a grant review team member. And I always was a champion because it was money that was coming back into your community, whether it was keeping the Women's Institute Hall open or a small little gathering and a building, or a Legion, and accessibility was improved. Colpoys Bay, we put in an elevator so that, again, that two-story building is a community hub. And without help from Trillium, they wouldn't have been able to do it. Things like roofing. So there's a fair bit of different variety. Hanover got some money for a park. They had old playground equipment that was, again, almost becoming out of date and in danger. They were prepared to rip it out just from a safety and liability. The good thing here is they'll be able to now replace it with new, modern, safe equipment. So, again, it's hard to keep them all in my head, but those are some of the most recent ones that I remember doing.
Sure. I think the Bayshore is also getting some funding for their ice plant as well.
You are correct. Yeah, that one was a fairly sizable one. So, yes, they are. for the refrigeration, which was fabulous. And again, I still think of the Bayshore as being a relatively new building, but it's been there quite some time. So those type of things, being a recreation guy, I know that asset has to be replaced. So again, it was great to get that for the city.
Yes, indeed. And when we think about it, I came to Owen Sound in 2000, and the Bayshore had been I think it was either just being or had just been renovated then for the first time.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it's not as brand spanking new as we like to think. It's been around a little bit, and like you say, stuff has to be replaced. And we've got a competitive team, so let's give them the good stuff. Let's give
absolutely.
them
David, the other one that some of these, particularly the things like an arena or a curling club, the other thing that it really does, if you think of back to 20-year-old technology, they're much more efficient. They're much more environmentally sensitive. They're lowering the cost of their operations so that, again, they can put more money back into other programs and services. So those are the other things that maybe sometimes get missed when you do an announcement. But there's that whole element that it's modernizing, making it more efficient, burning less fuel, which is, I think, great for everyone involved.
Yeah, and then speaking of modernization, there's money also been spent for municipalities to upgrade a lot of their technology, their back ends, so to speak, so that they can do business more efficiently. And that was one of the things you were working on when you were minister. You were minister responsible for that area.
Absolutely. A lot more modernization, digitizing, being able to do things electronically so that, again, you don't have to mail in forms or fax forms, and a lot of that just making people's lives more seamless and more efficient. And the other piece that I think we're really trying to encourage is particularly, again, beneficial to our small rural areas in Northern Ontario, that whole asset management program. So they know exactly everything they have and when a scheduled date should be looking at for replacement, as opposed to kind of in the old days, you just waited till something broke and then you scrambled and said, how do we fix that? How do we get it back? Now they can be ahead of the curve. They can start planning properly. And again, that gets back even to things like supply chain. If you know that in 3 years, you can make sure you've got your tenders out, you can make sure you've got your bids out, and then your orders, so that when you actually, I'll just say a generator or transformer comes offline, you've got the other one there. You're not scrambling trying to find one that maybe isn't in Ontario today.
It's funny you should mention that, because one of the things that I've always found fascinating is that, and forgive me, but I tend to be a little bit of a policy wonk, but if I look at for example, the Owen Sound budget, there is actually a plan for replacement that you can see as part of the city budget. So you know that in 2 years, they'll have to replace a snowplow, or in 10 years, in fact, well, this year, they just replaced the street sweeper because it had reached the end of life. And it wasn't that it had broken, it was just getting more expensive to repair. And what was really interesting, speaking of efficiency, was that it was quieter.
Yeah, 100%. And again, more fuel efficient.
Yeah.
Just how effective it works. And those, to your point, from my perspective, you need to be putting money away for that 10 years. So you're not grabbing $1 million or whatever the number would be. You've put incremental, like your home budget. You've put some money away so that you can afford it when it does need to be replaced, as opposed to, this is a shock factor, and how do we find that money? And a big tax increase that not many people like typically.
Exactly, as you well know, I'm sure. But there's also been some really interesting big funding spending around at Georgian College, and that's supporting the Honours Bachelor of Science in Nursing program, I believe.
Yeah, huge opportunity there. I'm just so pleased to be able to bring that complements the earlier to bring the nursing program. It'll be up to date, brand new. The latest technology. So again, our people that are coming here to take their training are going to be absolutely state of the art. So again, it sustains the facility. It's more attractive for people to come. Again, the people teaching want to be in the most modern surrounding, and more importantly, the equipment that they have to train on is really, really important. So very excited about that. And again, it kind of goes back full scale to what we were talking about earlier, David. I just think that's going to have huge benefits to the people here, because now, again, those people taking nursing can stay in their own backyard if they so choose. We're going to attract other people that now say, we've got a modern facility to come and have your education, and lots of jobs in our own backyard. So I think that's a fabulous one for sure. Yeah.
And this is part of the expansion at Georgian College that will be coming online probably within the next year. I
I
believe
believe it's scheduled to be online for next year. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see, and certainly something to watch for in our community, because as we've said before, nursing is a critical part of our future as a community.
Well, and great to have it back. I mean, we had nursing here for many, many years. Then over time, it got taken away. And again, people started going to Barrie or going to Toronto. And once they get there, they're getting recruited. They're finding a lifestyle down there and don't come home. So I'm really excited. And for the long term of the college, I think it's great. We now have that. We were able to bring the emergency training facility and make sure it's staying here. So I was very proud of those from the perspective of that gives the college sustainability going into the future.
Sure. Now let's switch into education for a moment, because I noticed that just after your last appearance here on Politically Speaking, you kind of hinted at it, but there was a major announcement for Tobermory.
Yes. So the daycare up there for many, many years has been trying to find funding to be able to upgrade. They were in kind of a basement. They've had some challenge with physical things like flooding, again, which creates safety and health issues. So, it was one of those ones that they've been banging, and we just kept persistent. And this is really the difference in some ways, David, of having the pleasure of being in government as opposed to opposition is, you have that much more ability to be able to be directly in line with the minister and pleading your case and having that one-on-one, where it's not always quite as easy and direct a line when you're in opposition trying to get another party to agree to something in your riding. So great news. The school board was excited, certainly the municipality, and most importantly, the family and the children that are going to be served by a new modern, again, facility. And Tobermory, I think I can say this comfortably that the community would agree with. They sometimes feel like they're the lost cousin at the end of the rope, right? So good news for them, and that they know that people are still paying attention and that they're not lost and forgotten just because they're a little more remote and northern.
Yes, we think of Tobermory during the summer quite easily, but we forget that it is a year-round community with people who live there, 365 days of the year, and more people are coming up. That's the other side of it. It's becoming much more populated. Just ask our real estate agents.
Yeah.
But
and that's one of the challenges, Dave, with a place like that, because your population base is so small. It's tough to go up against the new school, in Sound or Hanover or Meaford like we have done. But the need is just the same. It's just a much smaller, and how you do it, how you fund it is a much different thing. So sometimes it does take a longer process and a bit more selling, if you will, to get people convinced to say, we're going to invest a lot of money for a very small group of people. But again, with the growth, with the ability to continue to attract families so that the health and vibrancy of the community is there long-term, I believe those are absolutely critical investments, not expenses. They're investments in our community.
Sure. Now, going back to long-term care, there was also an announcement about 32 new beds in Hanover.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And again, I'll give you a little teaser. I've got one more announcement that we'll be making here not too far down the road. But, right now, I believe we've had more beds approved either to be replaced as part of the upgrade, which we're doing from some of the legislative requirements, or new beds. We're over 600 beds, and for 15 years, the former government only built 611 beds across the whole province. So Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, I'm proud to say, has done well in our allotment and our fair share, particularly when we look at our demographics. We are one of the older areas across the province of provincial population. So I think, again, it speaks well to, we've presented the case, we've shown the data, and we're getting that back in spades to be able to accommodate and make sure we have the programs and services. So ecstatic about Hanover, in addition to all the other ones that I announced here and in Meaford previously.
Bill, does it ever feel like you're going from announcement to announcement to announcement?
At times it does, yeah. And you know what? I'll just keep smiling and keep doing it, because every announcement that's coming here is for the benefit of the people. And for many years, you talked to me a little bit before the show. One of the things when I'm finally finished in this role is, for many, many years, I'm going to drive by some of these places and know that that's impacting people's lives positively. And that's what really I get into it in the first place for. So, yes, I feel like Santa Claus at times, and I'm okay with that.
Well, Bill, that's a great segue into our next segment, which we will talk about your political career and a couple of other things, and we'll go from there. But we got to take a break, so we'll be right back, friends. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. Stay tuned.
This program is brought to you by NBA League Pass. More dunks, more slams, more to love, live in HD. NBA League Pass, part of the Rogers Super Sports Pack.
I'm a singer-songwriter from Six Nations, and I've been writing songs about my experience, and with that being said, it's helped me hold hope in my heart in following my dreams and being resilient to everyday Indigenous battles. Competition between spirit, earth, and wind, let me tell you now. This song in particular, The Shiner, is a special song that I wrote for my grandfather. He was a snow snake maker, and that is a Haudenosaunee winter sport. It's my job to educate and to share, and the music allows me to do that. He'll be shining snow snakes and mudcats to the end of his days.
Hello everyone, your host Antoine Hashim here on the couch, and welcome to season 8. Yay! 8 seasons, and we got a lot of awesome guests coming up, so keep watching.
The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guest is our MPP, Bill Walker from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, and we've been talking all about the things that have been announced in the last couple of months since we last talked. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to Bill about his political career because, as everyone knows, Bill has announced he is not going to be running for re-election in the next provincial election, which is due on the 2nd of June. Bill, that kind of took a lot of people by surprise, at least in my circles.
Yeah, I think, David, to a person, everybody has said the same thing, that they kind of saw me as either, another 10 years or a lifer in some cases. I really have enjoyed my tenure, almost 11 years. It's a great job. It's a great honor. It was very humbling to be in the role. And yeah, a lot of people have said to me, would have never saw this coming. It's kind of out of left field, if you will. But for me, it was really just a case. I have done it for almost 11 years. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. I'm out virtually every night and every weekend, which means you're not doing things with family and friends. And again, for the most of it, I have truly enjoyed. I am humbled and honored to have had the role. But I'm young enough that I think I still want to do a couple of other things before I do retire. So I'll clarify for people, I'm not going home to the hammock quite yet. I do plan to still work, but maybe in a sense where I have a bit more control of the hours and the time frame in areas where I, again, can have family and friend time a little more disposable to me. And I say, not everybody gets to be 75 or 80 looking back in the rocking chair. And I just think right now I've got the energy, I've got the time, I've done a lot of really great things, I think, in government, but it's now time for a new chapter.
Sure. I mean, every politician has that, it used to be called the walk in the snow.
Yes.
I'm not saying you did that, but there is a time for reflection. And I don't think people realize that you don't just sit there and like a lump. You're continually meeting people, answering emails. I mean, as we've talked, there's a lot of, I can hear your phone going. I can hear your emails arriving as your computer goes ding. But it is a very busy job.
Yeah, and in riding our size, I mean, a lot of communities, a lot of different groups, organizations, just the number of councils alone to try to stay in tune with what's going on. So it really is a 24/7. It is something that, in my case at least, I believe the only way to do the job was to do it 100% all the time. And again, I don't begrudge that. I knew that walking in, so it's not a complaint. It's just, 10 years is a lot of time and a lot of energy. And people jokingly call me the Energizer Billy or Energizer Bunny. And you need that to be able to do the job. In my case, it's the only way I really know how to do it is to be out going 100% all the time. But it gets to the point again after 10 years that becomes harder to go out every night and every weekend, and a lot of those. And to your point, social media, they never stop. My phone, whether it's social media, emails, Messenger, Twitter, and I don't do any policy. So just for clarity for people, I've never once debated on any of those social media platforms. I don't believe it's the right place. I won't do it. I still do the old fashioned, if you will, and I still think it's pretty modern. Email, if you have something, then send me an email and we'll respond that way. But it becomes daunting because it never shuts off, and it's tough with the volume. I was just thinking the other day when Bill Murdoch was here for 20 years prior to me, I had the same number of staff in the office as he had 30 years ago. And think of how many more emails and social media access points people have as opposed to 30 years ago when most people still wrote a letter, phoned you, or came in the door of the office. So that's the other piece. And I want to give huge credit to my staff for keeping up with all of that volume, and especially during the 2 years of COVID. I mean, it has definitely been a trying experience for everybody, particularly at the front line, and nothing like obviously our nurses and the frontline healthcare providers, but my staff and all staff, I think, in public service have also been unsung heroes.
It's funny you should say that, Bill, because I had this conversation with Alex Ruff a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the crispiness of people and the lack of civility in sometimes. Has your staff been subject to a lot of that from?
Absolutely. Sadly and absolutely, David. At times, coming in and seeing either the look on their face, found them in tears. Have had phone calls when we're working remotely, huge levels of stress. And again, some of the recorded voicemails that they have shared so that I could hear it. A couple we actually reported to the police because they said that's unacceptable. That people cannot get away with that. And, I don't, yes, I appreciate and understand that people have been stressed and there's been high levels of anxiety. But at the end of the day, they're humans as well, and they're just doing their job, and they're trying to do it to the best of their ability. So it is definitely something that I've noted, and even in the last 4 years, if you will, compared to my first 6, the level of decorum has dropped. The civility has definitely dropped from the perspective of many people think they can just say, and again, sadly, a lot of that is on social media. There are people trolling social media, putting negative comments on about the most, I'll do announcements again, like what we've talked about today, and someone will find a negative to bring on to that, as opposed to saying, well, that's wonderful. My grandma or my son's going to get some new care. They're putting something derogatory. I just don't, I don't understand it. I'm a pretty positive person. I look for the positive. And that's one of the drains, frankly, of anybody in public service anymore, is that negative all the time drone of people who don't seem to ever put their energy into positive and helping out. They want to find the way to complain and find fault with people. That's a challenge going forward.
It's interesting you say that because around civility, because one of the things that Alex and I agreed on is that it's not the number of F-bombs you drop in your conversation or in your email. It's just how you make your case. And the other thing that I think is worth remembering, and I presume it also applies to you, because I've had the email responder bounce back to me saying, I will be back to you. We got your email. I'll be back to you. Make sure you include your phone number and, if possible, your address. Another way of contacting you, because did you find that phone calls back are more effective use of your time than email response?
Typically, and part of that, David, is because the volume and the detail that is required to actually sit and type and put it out to there, as opposed to having a very in-depth conversation quickly with a person where you can get a bit more of the sentiment and what they're really saying. I still follow the same as I always have, because I don't want to misinterpret someone. Put it in writing. If you really have a complaint, put it in writing. Give me the details so I can go and do the proper homework, or my staff can. So doing it from that perspective. The challenge, of course, is you also get these campaigns where people are calling, or they call relentlessly. They'll call 50 times, and it's something that I can't change. So am I going to spend 49 different calls back to that same person, or am I going to answer them once and go on to the other person who, in my case, most of the things we do here are like a hospital triage. If it's something that you need today, your license, a doctor's referral, that type of thing, that's where we're going. Someone complaining and bringing their concern to me about, what they believe their view of the world is, or a policy. Yes, it's important. Yes, I value it. but I've only got so many hours in a day. And the other thing is, people will do these campaign emails where we'll get 1,000 in a day. That's why I do the automatic reply, because if it's just a form letter from some group or organization that's trying to jam up your time, that doesn't let me get to little Mrs. Smith, who needs to see a specialist or needs to get into a long-term care facility. So we've always done kind of that triage. It's why we, again, flip it back and say we've got it, but I'm not going to be calling you back about something that I can't change. Or many people, again, it's not even an issue of the provincial government. And again, so do I do that, or do I do little Mrs. Smith, who, again, she's lost something, or she can't get her identification? Those are the ones that we're going to try to solve first.
And this refers back also to a point that Alex made, and that is that it would be really helpful if people understood who does what.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you don't. I'm sure you work with Alex's office, and you work with municipal offices as well, city managers and mayors and all that stuff. But if people can remember who does what, a case in point might be things like, and it's a controversial issue, the question of masking. Well, that's a provincial policy. You might get emails about that, but that's not Alex.
That's right.
And that's not the mayor of Owen Sound. That is a provincial issue. So let's deal with it at the provincial level.
And I think we're all trying our best, David, there to kind of identify, particularly on platforms like our website, that here are the things, for example, Alex's passports, right? So that'll be right on his website. We will put, you get your birth certificate from the Ontario government, you get your license from the Ontario government. But if it's birth certificate, if you log on to his, you'll very quickly see. And to your point, we have links. We try to do as many things collaboratively as we possibly can with all three levels of government. And certainly we're not, we're quite happy to help someone if they call us about a passport, but we're going to direct them because that's their area of expertise. We just don't have the time to be as knowledgeable as Alex's staff will be, or in the case of the city, if it's a lot of people want us to come in and supersede either the city or another municipality's bylaws, for example. And I always say, again, that's not really our role. I can work with them, but if it's a municipal bylaw, it's a municipal bylaw. It's got nothing to do with the province.
Exactly. And bylaw officers are sworn in by the city. They're not police.
That's right. Yeah, building official type of thing. Again, we are responsible for the building code, but the actual bylaws of the city of Owen Sound or the town of Erin Elderslie, those are very specific and distinct that they put in place for them at the local level. So I really try hard not to put my toe in the water of the other jurisdictions unless it's in a collaborative, can we help find a way to make it move forward for you?
Sure. Now, from time to time, I've seen demonstrations outside your office, and I guess that comes with the territory, does it not?
Absolutely. And again, I'm a big believer in the power and the freedom of speech, that people can come out and raise their objection, raise their suggestions. Again, as long as it's done respectfully, civilly. I always try to ask the people not to, again, take it out on my staff if they're trying to go out and go for lunch or do whatever. They've got a job to do. They're just doing what's expected, frankly, by the public. So definitely that is the case. But as we saw, some of these then become much more of a blockade and impacting people's lives, whether it be their personal life or the ability for goods and services to travel at the border, for example. So, if it's breaking the law, that's much different than having a protest and doing it in a civil, respectful manner. And I think those lines have got blurred over the last little while. Again, lots of anxiety, lots of stress with people. I understand. But if it's breaking the law, our job, frankly, is to set the law. So I can't go out and help promote people that are knowingly breaking the law for whatever their cause is.
Sure. And I guess that's one of the big changes that we've seen in the last 4 years as well, that demonstrations are demonstrations. I mean, I remember demonstrations when I was in university back in the Stone Age, but, that those things happen. But, at the end of the day, you blew off steam and you went home. I do remember one of my tutors in university was actually arrested and put on academic probation for something that he did in the university senate. Amazingly enough, he turned out to be one of the leading authorities globally in terms of political repression. And it's quite remarkable to see. So you never know what will happen, Bill, with people who protest. You just never know.
The other one that's changed again, and I it may just be a sign of the times and things that are building that aren't necessarily just specific, but again, people becoming much more personal. And I'll just use, because he shared it openly. People go down and protest the Premier's home. Doing it at Queen's Park is one thing. Doing our Constituent office is one thing. But going to someone's home, in my mind, is going way beyond what the reality should be and the respect should be. And what he's mostly concerned about is his neighbors are impacted, right? So people can't get in and out. They can't move freely. They have people screaming and hollering and making noise. Their quality of life is impacted, which he feels bad about, because they're obviously not directing it at those people, but they're getting the reverberation. And, I think many of us have had situations. Security has been enhanced. They've came and visited to make sure they're prepared if there are those type of things going on, which is not a good feeling. And again, for our families who don't necessarily step up for office, I mean, my wife and children are very supportive, but frankly, they're not the MPP. So I try to shelter them from any of that type of thing, as I'm sure most of my colleagues do, whether it be at provincial, municipal, or federal level. But I just think, we need to figure a way to go back to being. Protesting is fine. That's a right. That is something that is good for all of us, frankly, to have people that are challenging the system. That's good. But there's a line in the sand that I believe people shouldn't be going beyond. And would they do it if it was their son or daughter?
Good point, Bill. Good point. Now let's shift things a little bit, because I wanted to ask you, you've spoken very generally about the privilege that it's been to represent people in this electoral district. And you've also said, as you drive by a building, and use the Markdale Hospital as an example, you can think very well and very warmly of the work that was involved in getting that job done. But are there any specific highlights that you can name in the last 11 years that you're especially proud of?
Absolutely, David. And I mean, there's multitudes, but I'll narrow it down. And one really does stick out in my mind. And part of it was because it took a lot of tenacity to get it there. So I had a young person who sadly was in a car accident. They lost their leg. I think they were 14. They got a prosthetic, but a new version had came out. Again, innovation, design, those type of things. And they were struggling to be able to get accepted for a new prosthetic, which would give them much better quality of life, would allow them to be part of the workforce, be a better family member. And it really was, frankly, an internal battle with the Ministry of Health. And I was in opposition when I did this. So again, it took a lot more tenacity and ability to kind of weave through and figure it out. But at the end of the day, after much, much challenge, and I give full credit to the mom and dad and the person who was doing it, because they truly were the heroes. They kept at it and kept feeding me the information that allowed me to push on their behalf. And at the end of the day, he was able to get his new prosthetic, and he is, going to have that quality of life enhancement. So that one will always be one if I just have to pick one. But whether it's that type of thing, helping someone get medication, helping someone get out of poverty, if you will, because we've been able to provide a program or a service. I've gone to a lot of events where we've done some programs. I'm just trying to think of the name of the actual program. A lot of them here with the city library and Jill Umbach and folks like that.
Bridges out of poverty.
Yes. So those type of things, again, where you can go in and give them a bit of funding to give them that hand up and know that over time that life will continually to improve. Those are the type of things that I think all of us want to get into politics for. At the highest level, as you say, something like Markdale Hospital, which will serve that community for the next 50 or 75 years, the long-term care facilities that all of our loved ones are going to benefit from, mental health, the programs and funding that we've been able to achieve, and back to those Ontario Trillium Foundation grants, enhancing a facility or a program that, again, is going to be what I always think of it as a community hub that's going to help people be active, be out socializing, stay active in their community, and keep their health. All of those are kind of the things that when I think about why I get into politics, those are the reasons. And whether it's a physical building or just, the person who comes up and says, you know what, that did make a difference. There's nothing like that. Or the letter that you get back from someone saying, just thanks for actually listening and helping a little bit. There's all kinds of individual cases. And again, my staff get the bulk of the credit because, frankly, they do the bulk of a lot of that legwork behind the scenes. So both here and in Toronto, so those are the type of things that I guess if you're from my perspective, that will be my legacy, is those things that we've been able to do that will impact positively people's lives.
So, life after politics, what's it going to be?
Yeah,
I cannot believe, Bill, you're gonna go. We'll find you sitting down in Florida or in the Caribbean, sipping a nice cold drink. I'm sorry, that's just not you.
No, you've got me nailed pretty good, David. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything in hand. You know, some people said, "Oh, you've got a job at Bruce Power." I don't have a job at Bruce Power. I don't have a job anywhere that I'm going to. I do have a couple of areas of pathways. Part of it because of some of the things I've been able to have the privilege in government to do, and particularly sitting at the cabinet table and as a minister, opened up some doors that I think gave me opportunity that I might be able to go and pursue. So I'll try to do some things like that. I want to do a couple of things that I haven't had experience at. You know, sitting on a corporate board, for example, is something that I believe I have the competency and the ability. Now it's finding a fit where I can actually go and do that. And most of it, David, to your point, so I'm not going to be in the Caribbean too long or Florida, but I will take a bit more time to do some of those fun things of golf with family and friends, you know, things that I haven't been able to do a whole lot of over the last 10 years because I'm always on the go. But it's really going to be at my pace and my time. And again, my wife retired, so more time with her. My boys are older. You know, we've been doing it. We have a property that we've bought. We've been out cutting trees, which has really been a nice, actually, stress relief and a bit more time with them one-on-one where I am around them and doing some things. So yeah, I won't be putting my feet in a hammock quite yet, and unless there's no jobs given to me, which I guess could be a possibility. But I'm just going to kind of get through the election. I'm really going to try my best to make sure that Rick Byers, who is the candidate here, because I believe you want that continuity of government. I believe we will form the next government, and I believe being at the table has a definite advantage, particularly with things like funding and the ability to do things. So I will do, and then I'm hopeful to take a couple of weeks at least at the end of that election and kind of chill, and then we'll start the next chapter.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, Bill, and we'll certainly keep watching for you. But this also, since you raised the candidacy of Rick Byers, can you explain the process? I mean, you resigned, or you said you were not going to continue, and within a few hours, Rick had been appointed as candidate. And I know there was a lot of conversation in social media about, hey, just a minute. And yet, I believe the party's constitution does permit the premier to name candidates. Does it not?
Yeah, so just a couple points of clarification. You're bang on, other than a few idiosyncrasies. So one is almost all parties that I'm aware of have the same type of provision. Numbers might be different. It's mostly intended for extenuating circumstances. And I want to be right off the bat, David, say nobody really wanted to do an appointment. Bill Walker had to go out and run a nomination and do that. But again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's a very challenging thing. There's a short runway to be able to get to the election. And it isn't the premier in this case, it's the leader of the party who has, and the Constitution allows that. So was it something that anybody really wanted? No. On the other side of the coin, Rick has been my campaign manager. He would have been my campaign manager this time. He's been my CFO. He's been my president. He's very involved, and he understands kind of our whole dynamic. So when you put it down to, okay, we're going to run into something, I know the person who organized the federal nomination process. It takes a lot of volunteers and a lot of work. Again, without COVID, it was a daunting challenge. Now you're in the middle of COVID, ability to get people organized, ability to get people through the facility to do the vote and do it in a seamless manner. So the decision was made. We have someone who's a viable. I actually gave 3 names to the party, and those were chosen by the party. It wasn't done locally, so the executive here had nothing to do with it. I gave the names, and they came back and said, here's who we believe we would like to carry the banner. And on Rick's behalf, his basic situation was the premier, the leader, called and said, would you be willing to serve as the candidate in Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound? And Rick said, I'd be honored to do so.
Sure. And I think that's one of the things, again, we've talked about, knowing what the policies are and knowing what the how things are done. And as odd as it is for many people, because I know I've read the concerns, it is certainly within the constitution of the party. And as you said, the leader of the party, who is the premier, to make these decisions, and the party can can do that. And I think you're right. It's true with pretty much every party across Canada, that provincially and federally is just a matter of, as I have always said to Michael Harris, know your civics.
100%. And over time, David, like again, under normal circumstances, if you had a 6-month runway, if you didn't have COVID, Bill Walker, first and foremost, would have been the guy absolutely saying we're going to do that. But because of these extenuating circumstances and the challenges, and we also have to realize there are groups that can formalize very quickly and come into something like a nomination. And actually, it's just a numbers game. We've seen it happen in multitudes of situations. So the last thing I'll say as Bill Walker, who does and has committed 10 years of his life, the last thing I wanted was someone able to be able to come in and take over that whole position that isn't really someone who I believe is going to do the same type of job. I'm very comfortable and very supportive of Rick, that he thinks like me a lot. He's been in the background working with me. He brings the same ideals, and he really does want to make a difference for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. So it's one of the ways for Bill Walker to say, I know people aren't going to be happy with it. I know it's not what we really wanted, but in this situation, I just believe he's the candidate. We got to jump on his train and make sure it's partisan, obviously, because I want him to win from a Conservative. But part of that, again, is if we're going to form government, do you want someone who's in a different party who's not at the table? And I've shared with you numerous times how much difference it is being in opposition trying to get something done, or being at the table with whoever's in government getting something done. And I believe he will do a good job, and we need to back him. I think you're frozen, David.
And I think what happened there, Bill, is we lost signal, but that's okay. And I know that you carried on. You have that ability. But I was gonna. I'm glad that you raised this, because I think that it's an important issue, but it's also one of knowing the way we are governed in Canada. We are not an American system. We are a Westminster parliamentary democracy, and it applies at the provincial level as well as the federal level. So it's been an interesting conference. And I actually, to be honest with you, I look forward to speaking with all of the candidates. And if I can put a little plug in here, we will be on Rogers TV. We will be interviewing all of the candidates. Of course, we don't know who is all going to run yet.
Right.
Won't know until after nominations closed, but I will have the opportunity to interview all of the candidates who are on the ballot for the next provincial election. And our hope is to have, as we did in the federal election, shows that where the candidates can speak themselves. So look forward to talking to Rick, and although I have met him occasionally, I look forward to getting to know him a little better.
Yeah, David, and the other piece, just to finalize that, I really tried hard once I became the actual member of Parliament, is to be representative of people in different walks of life and different beliefs of political stripe. And I think that's the key for anybody that gets elected. You come with your own thought processes, and yes, you have ideals with the party, but you're also there for the whole people. And everybody uses those long-term care facilities, those schools, the water filtration plants. Everybody benefits from that regardless of their political stripe. And I tried my darndest to be that representative, to get as much as I could for the benefit of people back to Bruce Grey.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for both in the long term for the service you've given to this community, to this riding, and look forward to, well, who knows, our paths will cross again.
I'm sure.
Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound isn't that big, so right. We'll look forward to talking to you again, and we'll see you. All right.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, Mark and team, for always allowing me the opportunity. It truly has been a humbling honor and a privilege of a lifetime.
And thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. We'll talk again.
call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.